everyone, it's Katie with Demuth Fly Fishing. Before we get started, let's go over some of the materials and tools that we'll be using to tie the October Caddis CDC Variation. A bobbin and Semperfli Nano Silk 12/0 in white, wax, scissors, a comb and hair stacker, Hackle Pliers, a Bodkin, a whip finish tool, Sally Hansen, the Ahrex freshwater 531 hook in size 12, Nature Spirit Beaver Plus dubbing and rusty spinner, Semperfli SemperFlash in crystal copper, bulk CDC by MFC in rusty brown, Nature Spirit Select Cow Elk in orange, Whiting Farms Pro Grade Hackle in barred dark ginger, and an orange Sharpie. Okay, that's everything we'll need. So let's get started tying this fly.
Hey guys, welcome back. Big thanks to Katie for going over the tools and materials that we'll be using. This pattern is one that we throw throughout the year, but in the fall, we make it a little bit bigger and we tie it in an orange color variation. So let's get started. In the vise, we've got the Ahrex freshwater 531 in a size 12. In the bobbin, we have the Semperfli 12/0 Nano Silk in white. I'm gonna run the Nano Silk through my thread, I'm gonna run my Nano Silk through the wax and put my glasses on, because it always helps to be able to see your fly. So I'm gonna start the thread about a quarter of the way back or so. So I've got about a quarter of the hook shank that's bare. I'm gonna work it back towards the hook bend. And then right when I get just past the hook point, I'm gonna cut my thread off by putting my scissors on the hook shank and raking it across. And I'm gonna work my thread all the way back to where I want the body to stop. Just about right there. I'll bring my thread back up. Now I'm going to put my dubbing on, and the dubbing we're going to be using is this Nature Spirit Beaver Plus dubbing and rusty spinner. And I've got a slit cut out of the corner of the bag here, so I'm just going to pull some of the dubbing out. And you can just kind of slide it out like this. And I'm going to make a dubbing noodle that's long enough to go from the where my thread is now back to the hook bend and then back up. So I'm going to double up the dubbing. Doubling up the dubbing is nice. It is a bit of a mouthful, but it is a nice way to make a thicker body as opposed to just making one thick dubbing loop. So we're just going to dub this up. And this is about a 4-inch or so dubbing noodle. Slide it up to the start here. And I'm going to have the dubbing start right where I want my body to start here. Bring it back, touching wraps. I want to make sure that this body is nice and even and smooth. Now this Beaver Plus dubbing is nice because it has trilobal fibers mixed in with it. So it gives a nice little sheen to it. As you can see, as I'm bringing the dubbing back up through that, I'm able to make a nice, thicker body that's nice and smooth, nice and even. So we've got our body made. If you get any long fibers, normally I don't trim too many off. Get any long fibers in there that are aggravating you, you can snip them out. But I like those trilobal fibers and some of the beaver fibers to come off and add to the profile. So our next material is the SemperFlash in crystal copper. So I'm going to take one strand, pull out my scissors and cut it off. I'm going to line up the ends and cut it so I now have two pieces. I'm going to line up the ends again and cut it. So now I have 4 total pieces. Now before I tie this in, I want to just run my thread up to right behind the hook eye and back. That just gives my material a little something to grab onto. I'm going to hold it roughly at a 45-degree angle from the hook shank, with a loose wrap captured in like so. I want to make sure that my tips are going well past the bend of the hook. Now with light wraps, just bring my thread forward. Now pull the remaining SemperFlash back. Hold it up on top of the hook shank. Now we've got a nice underwing. So now we're going to cut our underwing. So I just grab this, pull it straight back. I put my scissors right up against the hook bend and then back it up just a little bit. And that's how long I want my underwing to be. So now for the CDC. Now this is a fun little trick that I like to use. I have a CDC feather from this pack of MSC bulk CDC, and as Katie has done a very nice job labeling it. This is rusty brown. So I'm going to take the CDC feather out, and I hold it like so, and I pull it, stroke all the fibers back. And what I'm looking for is a feather that the fibers, when I hold it up to the hook shank, where I'm going to tie it in, are going roughly to the back of the body, if not a little bit past, because it's okay if it hangs out the back a little bit. So I'm going to take the CDC feather and these bottom fibers, I'm just going to strip off. So I don't really want those in there. And I'm going to grab it by the tip and separate it. So now I have now I have a CDC tip sticking out here. And then I take my CDC feather with one loose wrap, capture it, pull it just a little bit. I'm going to bring my thread forward, then pull all this back and wrap it back on itself. Now that step is nice because it makes sure, pull really tight, because you make sure that that CDC tip is not going to come out. Now with open wraps, I'll bring it right back, bring the thread right back to behind the hook eye. So now I'm going to get my Hackle Pliers, grab it by the butt end, and we'll stroke these fibers back, because I want all these fibers to lay back. And I'm going to wrap my CDC feather with touching wraps all the way to the front until I feel like I have enough CDC or I run out of CDC. They don't have to be completely lined, completely touching. We'll just wrap it around. We might get one more wrap out of this. There we go. So we'll stroke all the fibers back, put a couple wraps, make it 3 wraps, pull tight, then we'll put another 3 wraps in front. And what I don't want to do is, during this part of the tying process, I don't want that CDC feather to slip out. Because what we're going to do is we're going to wrap back on top of all this, and that's going to bind the CDC down with no issues at all. But first I'm going to hold my thread and pull all those fibers up. It's okay if some of them are on the bottom, but for the most part, we want this to be a nice underwing. So pull those fibers up. Now I'll work my thread back to where my dubbing is. Check. That looks good. So now we've got our nice little CDC underwing with our Krystal copper flash as well. So it's time for a little elk hair. Now this is the Nature Spirit Select Cow Elk, this dyed orange. So we'll take our scissors and we'll just kind of use our scissors to part the hair and pull up however much we need. And we'll cut it real close to the hide here. Switch it over and grab it roughly a third down from the tips. So we've got 2/3 of the fibers sticking out. And I'm going to clean it. Now cleaning is a very important step in this process because as you can see, just with the first 2 or 3 breaks with the comb, you get a lot of this underfur and short fibers in there. We're removing all that material. That underfur almost acts like Velcro when you are stacking the fibers and makes it to where the fibers don't align, and they also it also absorbs water, so that will not aid in the floatability of your fly. We all want to have a good high floatability fly for sure. So now let's stack it. That should be about good like that, and I'm going to tap it on the side because what we're doing is when we stack up and down, the fibers are aligning this way, and with a couple little taps on the side, that just kind of settles them down this way. I'll pull them out, and we'll look. As you can see, we've got our tips lined up. That's looking just the way we want right there. I'll pull this out. Make sure there's nothing. Okay, we'll pull this out. We'll set this down, and we want the tips to go back roughly to the hook bend, and we'll pinch the fibers and the hook shank, and then we're going to bring the thread up, and with a very loose wrap, almost no pressure, bring it around. Now we're going to put another one right here and then pull straight up, and that's going to flare our butt ends. And now we want to grab some of the hair, bring it down. And as I'm capturing the butt ends here, I'm working my thread forward towards the hook eye. So as you can see, I'm not bringing it back to its original position. So what I want to do is I want to start building a little bit of a ramp that we're going to be tying the hackle in with. And every time I pinch that wing, so it doesn't flare, or so it doesn't spin around the hook shank. So now we've got the thread wrapped through the butt ends, and that is tied in very securely. It's not going to spin. It's not going. That wing's not going anywhere. So we're going to hold the butt ends up, put our scissors down just like this. And if you cut some of the tips off, that's fine. But push down and cut it off like this. So we've got everything cut out nicely. We've got a nice little ramp made to the hook eye, and we just want to make sure we're cleaning this up just a little bit, to make sure we don't have any long fibers that are going to go into the hook eye. So we'll pull this up, make sure that our underwing's still situated the way we want. As you can see, we've got a nice underwing with a CDC, adding a little extra bugginess to it. And we've got a really nice tie-in point here that has completely secured the elk hair fibers. So now I'm going to work my thread back through the butt ends, where I just cut them off. What I'm doing now is getting a nice smooth ramp, because we're wrapping hackle on this. The dubbing's going to help tremendously. We're wrapping hackle on this. We want the underbody to be as smooth as possible, and that's one of the keys to wrapping nice hackles, having a good solid underbody. So now we're going to pull out our hackle, and this is a Whiting Pro Grade saddle that is barred dark ginger, and this is a nice one, but it has a lot of browns and furnace feathers in here. So as opposed to using one of the nice barred dark ginger ones, I've got one that's kind of a mix of both here. Got some brown and some barred dark ginger on it. So this is one we're going to use because I like a little bit darker head on this fly. And to prepare this feather, I've just got it cut off here, and I'm going to pull some of the fibers, some of the barbs off the rachis, just like this. So that's all the preparation that's going to be needed. Now I'll make sure my thread is nice and flat, because I want to keep this part really smooth. Bind that down. And if you don't like, before I tie the hackle in, if you don't like how this is flared up, you can just hold everything. You can put a few wraps with hardly any pressure at all. Then bring your thread back down and tighten up, and that's going to push the push your elk hair tips down a little bit so it doesn't flare quite as much. For me, it doesn't bother me too awful much. Okay. Now we're taking our saddle feather, and I'm going to tie it on my side. And capture it, lash it down nice and tight, especially your first wrap or two, because you don't want to flare this hair too much. You can keep kind of loose. After about two or three wraps, you want to start tightening it up to make sure that we have a good tie-in. So the last thing we want is to have everything done and have this feather pull out. So now we're going to go back to our Nature Spirit Beaver Plus dubbing in that same rusty spinner. If you wanted to go a little bit darker on the thorax, you sure can. But I'm going to stick with the same color, and I want this noodle to be pretty thin. More than just dirtying up the thread, I really don't want much. I don't want to build much bulk. Because what this is doing is just basically making the area that we're going to wrap this hackle sticky. And what I mean by that is we're just putting just enough dubbing to color the thorax up, and this will give the hackle a little something to lay down into. So we've got about a 3-inch noodle that's pretty darn thin. And I'm going to bring this back up to here. In this first wrap, I'm going to put a little bit right behind that feather. Now I'm going to bring it back forward, just with nice little smooth, touching, even wraps. You can inspect everything, make sure it's looking nice. When we get to the front, we'll pull this extra off and put a wrap there. So now I can pull the excess dubbing off. Sure, don't have anything major there. And I'm going to get my marker out, because I don't want this head to be white. And one of the nice things about Semperfli Nano Silk is you can color it virtually whatever color you want. So I'll pull this back, and now I want to look at the fly and see how we're looking. There's one CDC feather here that's kind of getting on my nerves. CDC fiber, excuse me. And there's one little guard hair here. And other than that, it's looking okay. Let me take some of this out here. That's not going to affect anything. Okay. So, move my light around so that my bobbin doesn't stick to it. Okay, so now we're going to wrap our hackle. So to wrap this hackle, I'm just going to wrap straight up and straight down. So bring it straight down. This, bring it straight up. And we want to have a nice dense hackle. The wraps don't need to be touching. They need to be nice and consistent, smooth, and even. If I put one more wrap in, we'll call that done. Shorten up my thread. We'll put 3 wraps in. Do the same thing we did a minute ago. Now we'll pull tight, put 3 wraps in front. So that's nice and locked off. I'm going to put our scissors right here, right behind the hook eye, cut that off. Like that. If there's any longer fibers we want to get rid of, now's the time to cut them off. If there's anything too major that's aggravating you, this step is really not necessary, but hey, no big deal. So now we're going to whip finish, and before I do, I want to make sure that I've got enough orange on my thread. Take our whip finish tool, bring it right in. So I'm coming in at an angle because I don't want to capture any of those hackle fibers. 5-turn whip finish, pull it tight, now we'll cut it off, cut that thread out. And the last step we're going to do is put a little Sally Hansen's on our head. If you get any hackle fibers, if you'll just flick it with your fingernail, it'll flick it right out. Got one right there that's aggravating me. There we go. So I'm going to the Sally Hansen's there, that's fine. You can take the applicator, slide it up, back down, or you can use a piece of wire. And that is going to soak in, disappear, and it's going to protect the hackle stem as well as our tie-off point. And there we have it. Here is our October Caddis with a CDC and Flash underwing. And that nice Beaver plus dubbing makes a really nice body. The hackle looks good. That was going to float all day long. It's going to be nice to use as a dry and a dry dropper combo, or just throw it all on its own. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you tuning in. Katie and I are live on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern Time for Whip Finish Wednesday, which is our show where we tie various flies and let you all hop on and ask questions and jump in the fun. Hopefully we'll see you guys hop on one Wednesday night. Until then, happy tying, everyone. Thank you.